All right, got another win, and have made some adjustments that I am actually pretty excited about. I came across, I was looking, I don't remember how I was looking into it, but anyway, I came across a particular card. This one right here, Palace Jailer, and Palace Jailer. Uh, it's been on my kind of like back burner, but the more I was thinking about it this morning, the more I realized how perfect this card is. And I have actually replaced Gilded Drake with Palace Jailer. So Gilded Drake was a solution to what do you do when Emrakul comes into play. Palace Jailer is also an answer. The difference is when you play Gilded Drake, you take the Emrakul and then you attempt to beat them with it, and that's not too shabby. They can, however, of course, return Emrakul and try again later. And if they do find a way to bounce Emrakul, for example, if they cast Jace, um, then you are looking at probably getting your face smashed in by a Gilded Drake backed up by a Jace, which is kind of nasty. Palace Jailer, on the other hand, comes into play and exiles a creature. So it'll exile Emrakul, done, it's a wrap, don't need to worry about it ever again. But more importantly, Palace Jailer, this card is insane. So what does it do? What makes it so crazy? So when Palace Jailer comes into play, you become the Monarch. And if you're not familiar with being the Monarch means that you get a token, um, a token that's going to get passed back and forth between you and your opponent. That token sits under your control, stating that you are the Monarch. And the value of being the Monarch is that during your end step, if you are the Monarch, you draw a card. So the turn you play Palace Jailer, you're going to be drawing a card. Why? Because to lose the Monarch status, your opponent must deal combat damage to you. And do you know how hard it is to deal combat damage when your best creature's just been exiled and there's a 2/2 body left? It's pretty tough. But it's extra tough when you're playing against like Breya, when I can throw like multiple blockers in play, when I have mass removal. It is very, very, very difficult to take Monarch status away from this deck. Now it's Palace Jailer is a kind of a complex card, so when Palace Jailer dies, absolutely nothing happens. So you can become the Monarch and then chump block or trade with Palace Jailer, no problem. However, if your opponent does manage to take Monarch status back from you, then they get their creature back. So if you use Palace Jailer and you use it on your opponent's commander, and they put it in the command zone, and then somehow they manage to, and then you draw a card at the end of your turn, and then somehow over the course of the game they become the Monarch, their commander is not going to return because it's not locked under Palace Jailer. And most people will not take the risk and lock it under Palace Jailer. So basically, this card just says, come down, exile someone's commander, and oh, by the way, you now have a Howling Mine that your opponent can't interact with unless they can actually deal damage to you. For the decks that are out there right now, the control decks, the green and blue, that can be very, very difficult. And it's pretty clear that you're not going to slam this if it's going to cost you the game, right? So you use a little discretion. But what an insane card! So Gilded Drake is now Palace Jailer. Rather than my opponent getting a card, I am now getting many cards. The other thing that's neat about Palace Jailer is you could bounce it. Let's say you bounce it with Jace. It's fine. They don't get their creature back, which would allow you to replay it and become the Monarch again. If you're already the Monarch, nothing happens. You don't get to draw 2 cards per turn. But then you can exile another creature. So you can turn Jace into a repeated exile effect, basically, for every time you bounce Palace Jailer and recast it. So that's something interesting. And it's also a way that you could potentially get the Monarch status back. So imagine, you've used Palace Jailer to exile one of their creatures, and you become the Monarch, and then somehow they manage to kill it and hit you, and then you, like Yawgmoth's Will, and put Palace Jailer in play, kill the creature that they just hit you with, become the Monarch again, and drive on. So pretty cool stuff. Great card in here, I think. So I actually took that out, and realizing, because I had added Supreme Verdict already, and because I already had Supreme Verdict in the deck, I decided that I probably don't need Diabolic Edict. Given the choice, if I'm mystical tutoring for a solution to Emrakul and that mystical tutor is resolving, I'm going to go get Supreme Verdict because I don't want to take any chances. So I think Verdict just makes more sense. And running both, while good, wasn't great. I don't like drawing Edict against most decks early, other than maybe Brawl or Jace. And even then, if you draw if they're playing Jace and Jace is flipped and you draw Edict, then it's kind of nothing. So I just got sick of that draw where I would have I'm playing against a control deck and I've drawn Edict, Verdict, Deluge, and I'm going, oh my gosh, like can I draw a card that actually does anything? Is just a little bit too much. So Edict was the weakest one, so I took it out. I'm not running Isochron anymore, so I don't really need like an abundance of imprintable targets. Fire Ice and Edict probably both come in if you like running Isochron, but rather than having Isochron trying to generate card advantage for me, I've got Palace Jailer over here, who just basically does everything. So having freed up the Edict slot and the Gilded Drake slot, Palace Jailer took one of those positions, and the other one was Expedition Map. So it's just so critical that you go get Cavern of Souls against the mono blue decks that I wanted yet another way to go get mana. And plus, this is an Armageddon deck, so having more ways to fetch mana after the fact or prior to, it all just makes a lot of sense. And it's quite good. Not only is Cavern Souls a great target, but you've got Ancient Tomb and Dimer Aqueduct. So, all right, so let's check out some games. And then Shackles is back in, but I'm going to jump back. Sorry, Shackles is back in, but it's kind of in a semi question mark state. The card is so good. I think Shackles probably stays. Brian thinks it probably stays, and that means it. With both of our, intuition saying leave it, it's staying. But I'm not sure. Like it wouldn't be better as another 3-drop. It could be better as like the Liliana that costs 3 mana, for example. Maybe it could be better as something else. I'm not sure. Like it could be Anguish Unmaking. It could be Recoil. It could be. There's a lot of like really solid 3-drop options. Phyrexian Arena for all eyes. Although we've got a Phyrexian Arena, it's a white one. Stinking Palace Jailer. All right, so let's check out some games. And I think Jailer actually comes up in at least one of these. All right, so oddly enough, I ended up paired against Tony Triceps in round 2, just as I was in the last video. So it's very, very strange. I don't know what it is about this Magic Online pairing me up with that guy in round 2 specifically. All right, so I'm playing against Nissa, and going first, this is keepable, and he does not play first turn Elf, and this is looking real good now. So here I've got the Jailer in my hand. So he goes for Rampant Growth, and I think about it and decide I'm not going to fight over mana with Nissa. I'm going to try to fight over board presence. So I Impulse and Seer Ravages, which is the long-term game plan, but I really need to get that white mana, so I take that. What I want to do here is just stick Jailer and then just draw 2 cards all the way to victory. All right, so my opponent goes for 3 visits, and I just have this feeling that if I lapse him here, so he can't play his commander, it's going to generate a ton of tempo. So, and that will give me time to put Breya in place. So now I expect him to go like 3 visits Nissa or vice versa. So he does the 3 visits, which we knew, was a possibility. And choke. Oh, nuts. That's bad, but I top deck Mox Opal. And I'm going to just go ahead and Night's Whisper and try to find as quickly as I can, go dig a way out. And then he Acidic Slimes, leaving Mox Opal, which is interesting. But yeah, this is real bad. Elvish Archdruid comes down. Fortunately, he's not playing Nissa, so I'm going to Vampiric Tutor, and I'm going to try to crawl out from under the choke with an Azorius Chancery. Pass for the turn. Now I pick up Volcanic Island specifically because I want to keep as many basic land types as possible for evasive action. And then he tries Reap and Sow kicked, which means I get to disrupt. Another green player getting disrupted. So cool. All right. Is it Boilerworks off the disrupt was huge because now I have 2 lands that tap for 4 and can work through the choke. The thing is, choke is an excellent card and it's obviously a major problem. And I've been getting some good top decks, but this is a Winter Orb deck, which kind of like plans to not be able to untap lands anyway. And speaking of Winter Orb, how about choke for you, Mr. Green Mage. Meanwhile, I'm going to just keep tapping him with Thopters. I really want to kill his Elvish Archdruid because the orb's out and I've got the mana to do it. But I was expecting his commander to come out some point, so I just forbidden buyback, keeping Jailer in my hand. And now I'm going to send in the team, hoping that he trades, and he does, which is great. So I'm going to Palace Jailer, smoking the Elvish Archdruid. I was hoping he would trade simply because I wanted to have no way for him to become the Monarch. And now he has no way. I mean, he's the Green Mage, but how is he going to become the Monarch? I'm going to draw 2 cards per turn for the rest of the game. And anything he tries to do is getting forbid with buyback. Like, this game's over. Thank you, Palace Jailer, for being incredibly awesome. And the best part is, if, say, my opponent had, like, I don't know, Beast Within, and he went Beast Within on Palace Jailer, and I'm like, oh no, I have a 3/3 now. He doesn't get his Archdruid back. He has to actually deal combat damage to me. Then I just keep hitting him with a 3/3. I don't care if the Jailer's alive or dead at this point. How crazy that card is. Okay, so that was just total gas. So I was pumped to see the Jailer in action there doing his thing. And then I was kind of sad to see this guy because he's a cool guy, and we keep facing each other in round 2, and either way that this game goes, I'll be unhappy because I'm either going to stomp him or he's going to stomp me. And, when it's a cool guy, you don't really want to knock people out of tournaments, and you certainly don't want to get knocked out of tournaments. I said, why do they keep pairing us? He says, because the YouTube viewers love it, which was funny. And I get a gnarly top deck. So my hand is almost all lands, but I top deck Weathered Wayfarer, and that guy is a house against blue. So insanely good. And look at this hand. It is just all gassed up, like with tons and tons of mana. So I go ahead and play fetch lands to see if I can walk him into the trap, but it's not really much of a trap because what's he going to do? Not play lands? And he does, so we're going to Tithe Trick, and I think it caused him to think for a little while. So I go ahead and get Cavern right away because I don't know if I'm going to get to use Wayfarer again, and I don't want to not have Cavern. All right, so I've got another fetch land, so let's try the Tithe Trick again. And I'm not going to play map or tax because I'm sitting on evasive action. I want to have enough mana to do Wayfarer action. This way, I could have done this in response to a spell and then gotten untapped land and then used cast evasive action. Just like that. All right, well, that was working nice. So why don't we just keep on doing that? So now I can actually cast either map or tax and not discard. So I'll just throw the map down. I mean, this is just so brutal. So my opponent finally repulses my guy. I'm not going to fight over that. So end step, we'll go ahead and fetch. I'm not going to use the map, though, until I know what I want to get. So here I think I misplayed. He could have very well... I'm going to pause for a second. If I were unlucky or he were clever or both on that play, then that repulse could have very well... He knew I had Cavern of Souls, so he may have been trying to talk me into doing exactly what I just did, which was, as soon as I did it, I was like, that was so stupid. The correct play here, by the way, was Ancient Tomb, end of turn Fact or Fiction, untap, play a land, and then cast Breya, uncounterable with the Cavern of Souls. At that time, then playing Cavern of Souls. But this play... Cavern into Wayfarer, sure, that's cute. I get a Weathered Wayfarer out, who's already done so much work that I don't even care that much if he's in play. But I just put my Cavern of Souls at risk. If he's got a wasteland, if he's been sandbagging a wasteland, and that was all part of his plan to try to trick me to do that, I just walked right into his trap. And that could make this game quite a bit harder, not having that Cavern of Souls out. Or a Dust Bowl, or whatever. Turns out he's got an end step Fact or Fiction, so we're going to try to action that, and he's forced it. So I decided to split it up, all mana or repeal and cryptic, and he chooses cryptic and repeal. Plays Baral, bounces the Wayfarer a second time, and personal tutors for polymorph. But he didn't have Wasteland, so I can now play, I believe Ancient Tomb's coming down. It's the only thing that makes sense here. Yeah. And we're going to cast Breya. And it's going to be very difficult. And here's the cool thing about having that. And I might as well cast the Weathered Wayfarer since I have no use for the mana. So the cool thing about the Expedition map, besides what it does and the fact that it's really, really good against control, is that, and also at putting together the the Crucible puzzle, is that my opponent, if I need to, I can sack two things, including the map, and still sack two more. So at the end of my opponent's turn, I do exactly that. I sack the map and a bird and kill his guy. And he bounces my other bird. And this is very bad for me because I have now screwed myself up a little bit here. I should have sacked probably bird and just left the map there. But fortunately, I factor fiction because I don't have two artifacts. So if he plays his guy and then polymorphs, I've got no way to stop it. But fortunately, I factor fiction into Demonic Tutor, which I take as a lone card, and Curse Slam. Down comes the bear, and it's just honestly, like, because with this blue dominated format, I really think that the bear is a necessity. And so after that, we're playing a little bit of stalling. I'm just developing my mana base. I found a Karoo, which is really strong. I go ahead and brainstorm with the fetch land out. I'm just trying to desperately hurry up and either find a counterspell or get an artifact into play before he can kill me with polymorph. So I also anticipate. So I play Signet, Zoria's Signet. I know he's got that repeal, so, or whatever that bounce spell was. Oh, Cryptic. That's what he has, Cryptic. So I'm trying to like hurry up and get a second artifact into play. And I thought about even playing a third one, the Shackles here, but it was too risky. Because if he were to deal with the Shackles in some way, like for example, if he went counter Shackles, bounce Winter Orb, I might be in trouble. So with this, I've got tons of mana and I can activate. So he goes Burrow Poly, and fortunately, he does not have Stifle here. That would be one way he could deal with this. He did have Confound, which allowed him to draw an extra card, but Confound does not stop the effect. He confounded his own polymorph just to basically cycle off the Confound, since I'm not really playing spells targeting creatures. And then, of course, I'm now on my turn with Winter Orb, and down comes an Uncounterable Commander. I even drew a counter spell. So that is pretty much all she wrote. But as always, he gives me a good game and is a pretty nice sort of fella. All right, so moving on to game 3 against Dream King 20XX. This was very challenging. I've played Dream King. I played most of these folks before. Certainly Tony and Dream King I recall playing. And I don't recall any of those matches ever being easy. So I go ahead and... So it's a Breya mirror match. And I have to mulligan. But I mulligan into this very solid hand. And he hymns. And I have to just let it go. Unfortunately, he nails Winter Orb, which was probably the most... Other than land, was one of the most devastating things he could hit. But at least I have multiple ways to recover my hand fairly quickly. So we're back to 5 cards. The board's even. He gets Jace down. Jace is another problem, but I'm going to have to just leave 2 blue up. All right, so he discards Lightning Bolt. So I'm concerned because once he gets to where he can flip that Jace, then he can him me back again. So get a Brainstorm off. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work. And I decide the way to do it is an Uncountable Breya. So we go Uncountable Breya, pass for the turn. All right, so he's flipping, and he's going to, I'm fairly certain, play his Breya as well. So it's down. And now I can finally, and I do this probably wrong, but oh well. So I go ahead and just gush into the ready. I should have tapped Cavern of Souls for part of the cost, but oh well. So anyway, I hit him for 4, and then I let him flip the Jace. I figure I'll attack Jace back, but I'm trying to keep the ready alive. So I'm gonna fight. I killed a land right there, which keeps the ready alive and gets a land, which, I mean, that's worth a Signet. You know, I traded 1 mana source for another. And I'm trying to push in and get Jace taken out, but I've got a 2/4 Breya instead of a 4/4. And then on my opponent's, and then I go ahead and play an after combat Demonic Tutor. My opponent counters it. So I I would have liked to have known he had Cavern of Souls in his hand. If he did, I would have countered back and got my tutor off. But I didn't, and this is now problematic, real problematic. All right, so I go ahead and make a second thing for Breya and kill his Breya a second time, a second bit of food. Kill his Breya a second time, and um, now I'm in a pretty bad spot actually. So he goes for a Planeswalker, which I counter, and thank goodness he doesn't have a counter back. And I read that as him not having a counter. So I could play a land here, cast Ravages with deprived backup, but because I have the read on him, I'm gonna just float mana and cast it, and it works. Right before he was able to play his commander a third time, which was fantastic. All right, so now Jace and 3 birds. Now, for some reason, he gives me the bird. I have no idea, you know, why he would do that. He should, if he had just raced me like with his 3 or 4 flyers against my 2/4 Breya, trying desperately to get through to Jace, I don't see how I could have won this. So I charge Amulet with white, thinking that I might want white as a backup plan since I was gonna pick up, oh excuse me, a land here. Then I draw a blue spell and I decide I'm just gonna dump the white mana and we'll charge it with blue mana instead. So God, Jace is so tanky, man. I kind of dislike that Planeswalker a lot. All right, so he tries to preordain and I just counter it. Because I figure he's digging for land. And I don't want him digging for land. All right, so Breya is doing good work over here. Look at the beating I've taken from these 2 birds. All right, so he is still trying to find land. He finally gets a signet. I'm gonna daze that, hardcast. Jace is over there giving me problems. I have Armageddon, so I'm not gonna play a land, but I'm not gonna Armageddon 5 of my mana for 2 of his. That's not a good plan. A Memory Lapse preordained from the grave, and Jace is finally dead. Now we can get in. And I was thinking, maybe do I Armageddon here? And then I drew Vindicate. I guess I don't. Yeah, that's it. So that was extremely brutal. Could have very well gone the other way. Put, what is that, 19 cards in my opponent's graveyard over the course of that game and 22 in mine. But it was that early him. As always, him is just so gross. The card is just horrible to face. All right, so that was game 3 against Dream King 20XX. I suppose I could run him, but man, I don't know. Probably what I ought to do is just run Misdirection. Like, you just wait till that time you have a Hymn to Torok, misdirected, and that'll make you feel pretty bad, I think. All right, so I'm playing Selvala again, and I was like, please don't have a Llanowar Elf. Oh no, my opponent's got much better than a Llanowar Elf. Look at this insane start. Like, this is big trouble for me. So I decided that the right sequencing order is actually not to play Dak Faden and take the Mox. It's to play the Ancestral and do this, and then just camp on the Remand. And I was rewarded for that decision when he makes a big play. So knowing he's got that big play, I'm just going to wait again. And I play City of Brass because I can get 3 blue this turn, and I'm going to go ahead and counter that and draw a card. I thought about maybe even bouncing Selvala here, but draw a card's better. You ramp in Gross, and I have 1 red floating, not 1 blue. I would have loved to disrupt that. All right, now I can finally Dak and take his Mox Diamond. He goes for Evoker, which is the last card in his hand. So I'm going to counter it because I don't want him revoking Breya, and because I have an Ancestral coming. So I figured I'd find a counterspell, and I don't. So with no counterspell, I'm going to play Breya and then do a little tech play here. With Selvala's triggers on the stack, I'm actually sacking Breya and a bird. And then what happens is, so first I drew off a Breya, and then I drew off the bird because when Selvala's trigger resolved, the bird was the biggest thing in play. So that's one trick you can do with your opponent's Selvala. You can actually draw 3 cards if you time it correctly, provided they don't have anything with power 1 or greater. Unfortunately, in this case, all he had was a bird. All right, so my opponent's generating mana, but I found a Winter Orb, and so he's trying to basically rebuild, and he found Arbor Elf, which I need to kill right now before he untaps any more forests. All I've got up is a Spell Pierce, though. It's not a very comfortable spot to be in. I'm sure it's worse for my opponent, but still. All right, so he plays Sylvan. I'm not going to tithe with actual lands, because tapping lands to find lands makes no sense, so I wait till I untap and then Mox Diamond into some lands. I'm going to try to either pressure his Sylvan or come up with a solution for it. Like I'm thinking about Mystical Teachings into Notion Thief might be a way to handle that. The problem is, so he goes for Eldritch Evolution, so the problem is I've got a Mystical in response to that and stop it, which is why I was holding Mystical in case I would need to make a play like that. So I go get Stubborn Denial, which is a negate with Breya out, and that allows me to stop the Eldritch Evolution and tap one less land than I would have had to if I'd have got most any other counter other than maybe Force. So I thought that was a really brutal. Like my opponent's start here was absolutely freaking insane. 5 mana on turn 1, going first. I'm going second, but somehow managed to put it all together and come up with a win. Which that was a. I was pretty sure I'd already lost the game before it started, so it was extremely like rewarding, I guess, or gratifying to pull the win out. So we played Tony, we played Dream King. That was Oral Harmonics, I believe, at roughly 18 minutes. And Nukular is the last person, and this one went pretty fast. And here we go. So another Selvala player. So I'm going to mulligan. My first hand was great against blue and crap against Selvala. So I mulligan into a hand of mostly mana and removal. And that's a perfect hand. A perfect Selvala hand. Anti-Selvala hand. All right, so he's got Selvala down. So I'm just going to, because I have some very strong follow-ups, I'm sitting here like figuring out exactly how I'm going to need to spend my mana over the next few turns. So I go ahead and just Deluge. He gets a bird and a homeward path. See, now if I'd been playing Gilded Drake, that would have been good against me. But I am playing Palace Jailer, sir. And I now have a Duretti running, and I'm drawing 2 cards per turn, and my opponent's got 3 mana, and he just gives up. So it was just awesome. I don't see how, from here, I don't see how my opponent could ever take the Monarch status back, other than maybe like. Also, notice that I fetched out Plateau and Scrubland, and if you watch me in most games, I always fetch out Islands. I did this specifically because the green decks run Choke, and the green decks run Carpet of Flowers, and I want to put as few islands in play as possible. So, like, this Wooded Foothills was actually going to go get Badlands, just because of that. For that reason, I also want to tap islands as infrequently as possible. I only want to tap them when I have to, in case I get caught under a choke. But in this turn was too strong not to tap them. So maybe if my opponent played Choke, but I mean I was still going to be drawing 2 cards per turn, hitting him for damage, having Duretti running. I get another land out, cast Talisman, and follow up with Breya. That's if they have a Choke, and if they don't, well, the next turn I get to go land, Talisman, Breya, make a dude. Yeah, and then draw a card at the end of the turn. So insane. Palace Jailer is awesome tech. I am so pleased with that. So, and that's about it. That's all I've got. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I'll just continue to try to provide updates as the deck matures. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.